The warning lights flashed red across the Galactic Council's main control room. Operator Velthera's tentacles moved quickly over his console as he tried to clean up the broken message coming from the far edge of space. The transmission was a mess of static and broken words, but one thing was clear: someone was screaming for help. "Sir, you need to hear this," Velthor called out, his voice shaking. He had been working these communication stations for 20 years, but he had never heard anything like this before. Council Chairman Mordic walked over, his long robes dragging across the polished floor. The holographic display showed a star system so far away it was just a tiny dot of light. But the sounds coming from that were pure terror. "This is Colony Leader Zeftel of the Kepler 442 mining station." The voice crackled through the speakers. "The Vactor ships came out of nowhere. They're killing everyone. Our shields are down. Our weapons are useless. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help. We have children here. We have families. Don't let them die for nothing." The message cut to static. Then it repeated. The same desperate voice, the same plea for help, over and over again. Mordic felt his stomach drop. The Vactar Empire was notorious throughout the galaxy. They didn't just conquer worlds, they destroyed everything that made life worth living. They turned free people into slaves. They burned cities just to watch them burn. Now they had found another victim. "How long until our nearest fleet can reach them?" Mordic asked. Military advisor Kethryn pulled up the tactical display. Red dots showed where their ships were positioned across the galaxy. The nearest battle group was 3 sectors away from Kepler 442. "At maximum speed, sir. 4 days." 5. "The Vactor won't wait that long," Mordic said quietly. "They'll either kill everyone or take them as slaves within hours." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. Another species would disappear from the galaxy. Another world would become a wasteland. It happened so often that most people had stopped caring, but Mordic still cared. He still remembered when the galaxy was a place where people helped each other. "Sir," Communications Officer Lethra spoke up from her station. Her voice was small and uncertain. "There is one possibility. The Deathworld system. Earth. It's only 2 jumps away from Kepler 442. The entire control room went dead quiet. Even the humming of the computers seemed to stop. "Earth, the legendary world that everyone whispered about but no one wanted to." "Visit the humans?" Mordic asked. "Yes, sir. They're the only ones close enough to help." Everyone in the room knew the stories about Earth. It was a world where everything tried to kill you. The weather could freeze you solid or burn you alive. The animals were monsters. The plants were poisonous. And somehow, the humans not only survived there, they thrived. "We've never made contact with them," Kethryn said nervously. "We don't even know if they have space travel." "The long-range sensors picked up some kind of activity in their system last year," Lethra replied. "Metal objects moving between their planets. They might have ships." Mordic stared at the display showing Earth's location. It was so close to Kepler 442, close enough to help. But humans were from a death world. What if they were as dangerous as their planet? "Sir, the Zephyrians are peaceful people," Velthar said. "They've never hurt anyone. They just mine crystals and trade with other worlds. They don't deserve to die like this." Mordic closed his eyes. He thought about his own family, safe on their homeworld. He thought about what would happen if the Vactar came for them. Thought about the children's voices he had heard crying in the background of that transmission. Send the message to Earth, he decided. All of it. The distress call, our location, everything. If the stories about humans are true, if they're really as tough as people say, maybe they'll help. And if they're as dangerous as their planet, Kethryn asked. Then we'll deal with that problem when it comes, Mordic said. Right now, the Zephyrians need a miracle. Sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places. Lethra began typing commands into her console. Message sent. Sir, now we wait. How long before we know if they received it? Mordic asked. If they have the technology to decode it, maybe an hour? If they decide to help? ... double quotes. She paused. We'll know soon enough. Mordic nodded and walked back to his chair. He had just made first contact with the most feared world in the galaxy. He only hoped he hadn't made a terrible mistake. Admiral Kim Tae-ho stood at the massive viewing window of Terra Station, watching Earth spin slowly below. The blue and white planet looked peaceful from up here, but he knew better. Down there, hurricanes were tearing across continents, volcanoes were erupting, and earthquakes were splitting the ground. And somehow, 8 billion humans called it home. The alien message had arrived 3 hours ago, and his team was still working to figure out what it meant. The transmission was unlike anything they had ever received. It used basic math and simple pictures to communicate, like something a child might draw to explain an idea. Admiral Lieutenant Park Soo-jin called out from across the command center. She was young, maybe 25, but she had the best language skills on the station. We've got it figured out. You're not going to like this. Tae-ho walked over to her workstation. The main screen showed the decoded message, with Earth's computers filling in the gaps. What he saw made his blood run cold. It's a cry for help, Park Soo-jin explained. There's a mining colony on a planet called Kepler 442. They're being attacked by something called the Vactor Empire. And what we can tell, these Vactor are bad news. They don't just conquer planets, they destroy everything. How many people? Tae-ho asked. The colony has about 50,000 inhabitants. Families, children, workers. They're not soldiers. They just mine crystals and trade with other worlds. Tae-ho studied the star charts on the screen. Kepler 442 was 2 jumps away from Earth, close enough to reach, but far enough that no one on Earth had ever heard of it before today. Sir, Intelligence Officer Lee Min-ho interrupted, walking up with a tablet full of data. We've been listening to radio chatter from that part of space for the past few hours. The situation is worse than we thought. How much worse? Tae-ho asked. The Vactar Empire isn't just attacking this one colony. They're expanding across that entire region of space. They've conquered 12 worlds in the past 6 months. And Admiral, they're moving in our direction. Tae-ho felt his stomach tighten. How long before they reach us? At their current speed, maybe 2 years. But if they take the Kepler system, they'll have a perfect staging ground for attacks on our sector. That cuts the timeline down to 6 months. The command center fell quiet. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Earth had spent centuries preparing for threats from space. But they had always expected those threats to come from much further away. What do we know about their military capabilities? Tae-ho asked. They're strong, sir. Much stronger than the colonies they've been attacking. Their ships are big, heavily armed, and they fight without mercy. But Lee Min-ho paused. We don't think they've ever fought anyone like us. Tae-ho knew what he meant. Humans were different from every other species they had encountered. While other civilizations built their ships for comfort and efficiency, humans built theirs to survive. Every human vessel was designed to operate in the vacuum of space, to withstand radiation that would kill most life forms, and to function in gravitational fields that would crush other species. Sir, what are your orders? Park Soo-jin asked. Tae-ho looked out at Earth one more time. Down there, people were going about their daily lives, not knowing that somewhere far away, an entire civilization was crying for help, not knowing that the same enemy might be coming for them next. Contact Fleet Command, he decided. Tell them to prep the 7th Fleet for immediate deployment. Full combat load. Sir, are you sure? Lee Min-ho asked. You've never made contact with alien civilizations before? This could change everything. It's going to change everything whether we act or not, Tae-ho replied. The difference is, if we help these people, we might make some friends. If we don't, we'll definitely make enemies. He turned to face his staff. Besides, we're humans. When someone asks for help, we help. It's what we do. And if it's a trap? Park Soo-jin asked. Tae-ho smiled grimly. Then the galaxy is about to learn why Earth is called a death world. Captain Choi Woo-jin walked across the bridge of the dreadnought Indomitable, his boots echoing on the metal deck. Through the massive viewing window, he could see the other 11 ships of the 7th Fleet floating in formation around them. Each vessel was a masterpiece of human engineering, built not for beauty, but for survival. The Indomitable was the largest ship in the fleet, stretching over a kilometer from bow to stern. Its hull was scarred from years of operations in asteroid fields and solar radiation zones. Other species might have called it ugly, but to Wu Jin, it was the most beautiful thing in the universe. It was home. Captain Navigation Officer Kim? So-young called out from her station. She was staring at her screens with a worried expression. I'm picking up energy readings from the target system. The Vector fleet is much bigger than our intelligence suggested. Wu Jin walked over to her station. The long-range sensors were showing dozens of red dots scattered around the Kepler 442 system. Each dot represented an enemy warship. How many are we looking at? He asked. At least 40 capital ships, sir. Maybe 50. And those are just the big ones. I'm seeing smaller vessels, too. Fighters, destroyers, support ships. Commander Han Seungmin looked up from his own console. He was Wu Jin's second-in-command, a veteran of the asteroid wars who had been fighting in space longer than most of the crew had been alive. Sir, that's 3 times our number. Maybe we should contact Terra Station and request additional ships. Wu Jin. It was quiet for a moment, studying the tactical display. The Vaktar had spread their fleet throughout the system, with the heaviest concentration around the third planet where the mining colony was located. They weren't just attacking, they were occupying. No, he finally said. We're not waiting for reinforcements. Sir Han Seungmin looked confused. Look at how they're positioned, Wu Jin explained, pointing to the display. They're spread out, confident. They think they're safe because they outnumber us. They're not expecting anyone to be crazy enough to attack them. Deng Hayan spoke up from his station. Captain, our ships are tough, but we're still outnumbered. This could be a suicide mission. Wu Jin smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile that made his enemies nervous. That's exactly what they're thinking. They see 12 human ships and 40 Vector ships, and they think the math is simple. But they don't understand how humans fight. He turned to address the entire bridge crew. Every one of our ships was built to survive in the vacuum of space. Our hulls can withstand radiation that would cook most life forms. Our engines can operate in gravitational fields that would crush other vessels, and our crews... He paused, looking around at the faces of his officers. Our crews learned to fight in the most dangerous environment in the galaxy, space itself. Communications Officer Yoon Ji-hai looked up from her station. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the mining colony. It's very weak, but there. Still alive? Put it through, Wu Jin ordered. A desperate voice filled the bridge, crackling with static. This is Colony Leader Zeftel. If anyone can hear this, we're running out of time. The Vaktar are preparing to move us to their slave ships. Please, if there's anyone out there, help us. The bridge fell silent. Everyone could hear the fear. In the alien's voice, somewhere in that distant system, innocent people were waiting to die or be enslaved. All right, people, Wu Jin said, his voice calm and steady. We didn't come here to fight fair, came here to send a message. The message is simple. When you hurt innocent people, humans will find you. We'll make sure you never hurt anyone again. He walked back to his command chair. All ships, prepare for combat jump. Set course for Kepler 442. Let's show these Vaktar what happens when they mess with our neighbors. The fleet's engines hummed to life, building power for the jump to hyperspace. In a few hours, they would drop out of hyperspace in the middle of an enemy fleet 3 times their size. Most species would call it madness. Humans called it Tuesday. The human fleet materialized at the edge of the Kepler system, like ghosts appearing from the void. One moment there was empty space. The next moment 12 human warships hung in the darkness. Their engines still glowing from the hyperspace jump, Captain Choi Woo-jin stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the tactical display light up with enemy contacts. The Vaktar fleet was even more impressive in person, massive ships that looked like floating fortresses. Bristling with weapon turrets and armor plating, they were spread throughout the system like a net, with the heaviest concentration around the third planet where the mining colony was located. My God, whispered Navigation Officer Kim So-young. Those ships are enormous. Each one is twice the size of our biggest vessel. Wu Jin nodded. The Vactar clearly believed that bigger was better. Their ships were built to impress and intimidate. Covered in spikes and angular armor that served no practical purpose except to look scary. Sir, Weapons Officer Park Dong-Hyen reported, I'm reading over 50 enemy vessels. They've got us surrounded. Captain Communications Officer Yoon Ji-hai interrupted, We're being hailed. It's coming from the largest ship in their fleet. Put it through, Wu Jin ordered. The bridge's holographic display flickered to life, showing a creature that looked like humanity's worst nightmare. The alien was reptilian, with dark green scales and bright red eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. Its face was covered in scars, and when it spoke, Wu Jin could see rows of sharp teeth. Unknown vessels, the creature said in a voice like grinding metal. This is Admiral Krekstar of the Vactar Empire. You have entered our territory without permission. Identify yourselves immediately, or we will destroy you. Wu Jin stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. He looked calm, almost relaxed, despite facing an enemy fleet that outnumbered him 3-1. This is Captain Choi Wu Jin of the Terran Federation, he replied in a steady voice. We received a distress call from the mining colony on the third planet. We're here to provide assistance. Admiral Krekstar's laugh was like the sound of breaking glass. Deathworlders. I have heard stories about your kind. You come from a world so hostile that it kills most life forms just by existing. How amusing. That you think you can challenge the Vactar Empire? We're not here to challenge anyone, Wu Jin said calmly. We're here to help innocent people. Release your prisoners and withdraw from this system. This is your chance to leave peacefully. Alien Admiral's eyes blazed brighter. You dare give orders to the Vactar Empire? You pathetic mammals come here with 12 tiny ships and think you can threaten us? We have conquered 100 worlds. We've enslaved entire civilizations. What makes you think you're special? We're not special, Wu Jin replied. We're just humans. What? And humans don't like bullies. Krekstar leaned forward, his scarred face filling the display. Surrender now, Deathworlders, and we might keep you alive as entertainment. Your little ships would. Make interesting toys for our children to play with. Wu Jin's expression didn't change, but everyone on the bridge could feel the temperature drop. When their captain got that look, it usually meant someone was about to have a very bad day. You have 30 seconds to release the prisoners, and withdraw, Wu Jin said quietly. This is your only warning. Foolish mammals, Krekstar snarled. Look around you. You are outnumbered 3-1. Your ships are smaller than our fighters. We will crush you like the insects you are, and then we will find your homeworld and do the same to them. The transmission ended. The bridge fell silent. For a moment, as everyone processed what they had just heard, the Vactar hadn't just refused to negotiate, they had threatened Earth itself. Wu Jin turned to his crew. His voice was still calm, but now it carried an edge that made everyone straighten in their seats. All ships, battle stations, he ordered. Raise shields, charge weapons, and prepare for combat. It seems these Vactar want to learn what insects can do when you step on their nest. The Indomitable began to hum with power as its systems came. Online, around them, the other 11 ships of the fleet did the same. The Vactar had made their choice. Now they would learn why Earth was called a death world. The Vactar fleet opened fire first, and the space around Kepler 442 exploded with light. Thousands of plasma bolts streaked through the darkness like angry red stars, all aimed at the 12 human ships that had dared to challenge the mighty Vactar Empire. Admiral Krekstar watched from his flagship bridge as the barrage lit up space. No ship can survive that much firepower, he declared confidently. These Deathworlders will learn what happens when you threaten the Vactar. Instead of turning away from the wall of death racing toward them, the human fleet accelerated straight into it. Sir Vactar, Tactical Officer Gricona whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. They're not retreating. They're charging directly into our kill zone. Krekstar's confident smile faded. What? That's suicide. No one attacks into concentrated fire like that. Sir, they're still coming, Gricona reported, his hands shaking as he watched his displays. Our plasma bolts are hitting them, but they're not stopping. The first wave of Vactar fire slammed into the human ships. The energy beams that could vaporize mountains struck the hulls of the human vessels and bounced off. The ships shuddered. Under the impact, their shields flaring bright blue, but they kept coming. "Impossible," Krekstar breathed. "Our weapons should have destroyed them instantly." What the Vaktar didn't understand was that humans had learned to build ships the hard way. Every human vessel was designed to survive in the most dangerous environment, in the galaxy space itself. Their hulls were built to withstand the crushing gravity of gas giants. Their shields were designed to deflect solar radiation that would cook most life forms, and their engines could operate in conditions that would destroy other ships. The human Dreadnought Indomitable plowed through the center of the Vaktar formation like a battering ram. Energy beams that should have cut it in half barely scratched its armor. The ship's weapons opened fire, and where Vaktar ships had been, there was suddenly only empty space and floating debris. "They're inside our formation," Greekina shouted. "How did they get so close so fast?" Human fighters poured out of the larger ships like angry wasps from a disturbed nest. The pilots who flew these small, deadly craft had learned their skills navigating Earth's chaotic weather systems, hurricanes, tornadoes, and electrical storms that would kill anyone else. Flying through enemy fire was actually easier than flying through a thunderstorm on Earth. Lieutenant Akim Soyoung piloted her fighter through the Vaktar formation, a ship dancing between enemy fire with movements that defied physics. She had grown up flying through the asteroid belts around Mars, dodging rocks the size of buildings, while traveling at thousands of kilometers per hour. Dodging enemy fire was almost relaxing by comparison. "Target the command ship," Captain Wu Jin ordered. "From the bridge of the Indomitable. Let's cut off the head of this snake." The human fleet concentrated their fire on Krekstar's flagship, the massive Vaktar vessel, which had looked so impressive just minutes before, began to buckle under the assault. Its armor, designed to intimidate, rather than protect, cracked like an eggshell. "Sir, our shields are failing," Greekina reported. "The Deathworlders are tearing us apart." Krekstar watched in horror as his fleet, the same fleet that had conquered dozens of worlds, was being destroyed by 12 human ships. In the first hour of battle, 6 of his capital ships were nothing but expanding clouds of debris.
"How is
this possible?" he demanded. "We outnumber them 3-1. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "the other ships are requesting permission to retreat. They're saying the humans fight like demons." Krekstar looked at his tactical display. Half his fleet was gone. Humans had lost exactly 0 ships. They fought with a precision and fury that he had never seen before. These weren't just warriors, they were predators. "All ships retreat," he finally ordered. "Jump to hyperspace immediately." Surviving Vaktar vessels fled in panic, disappearing into hyperspace one by one. Within 3 hours, the mighty Vaktar fleet that had terrorized this system was either destroyed or running for their lives. As the last enemy ship vanished, Captain Wu Jin stood on his bridge and looked out at the debris field that had once been an enemy fleet. "Sir," Communications Officer Yoon Ji-hai reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the mining colony. They're asking if we're really here to help them." Wu Jin smiled. "Tell them the cavalry has arrived. And tell them that Earth sends its regards." The airlock of the Vaktar prison ship exploded inward with a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Through the smoke and debris, 12 figures in black armor moved like shadows, their weapons ready and their movements precise. These were human Marines. They had come to collect the prisoners. Sergeant Major Oh Changmin led the team through the ship's corridors, his boots echoing on the metal deck. The Vaktar had built their prison ship to be intimidating dark. Passages, flickering lights, and the constant sound of machinery grinding somewhere in the walls. But Oh Changmin had trained in the underground tunnels of Earth's military bases, where the air was thin and the darkness was absolute. This was actually quite comfortable by comparison. "Movement ahead," whispered Corporal Li Hyanwu, his rifle trained on a junction in the corridor. "Vaktar guards, maybe 6 of them. Take them down quietly," Oh Changmin ordered. "We don't want to alert the whole ship." The Marines moved like ghosts through the passage. The Vaktar guards never knew what hit them. Within seconds, the corridor. It was clear and the humans were moving deeper into the ship. They found the prisoners in the ship's cargo hold, hundreds of them packed into cages like animals. The Zephyrians were small, delicate creatures with blue skin and large, gentle eyes. They looked up at the approaching humans with a mixture of hope and terror. Are you the Deathworlders?" asked a female Zephyrian, her voice barely a whisper. She was older than the others, with silver markings on her forehead that suggested she was some kind of leader. Changmin knelt down beside her cage, his massive armored form making him look like a giant next to the small alien. But when he spoke, his voice was gentle. "We're humans." He reached out and tore the lock off her cage with his bare hands. The metal that would have required tools to cut through crumpled, like paper in his grip. The Zephyrian woman, colony leader Siltith, according to her identification tag, stared in amazement. "How did you do that?" she asked. "Earth gravity is 3 times stronger than what you're used to," Changmin explained, as he helped her to her feet. "What seems impossible to you is normal for us." The other Marines were already opening the remaining cages, freeing prisoners as quickly as they could. Medical Officer Shin the Jin was moving from person to person, checking for injuries and providing treatment. Her hands were steady and gentle as she worked, treating wounds with the kind of care that only someone who truly valued life could provide. "Don't understand," Siltith said, watching the humans work. "We heard the battle outside. Your people fought like demons against the Vactar. But now, you're so gentle with us." Changmin looked at her with eyes that had seen too much war, but still held compassion. "That's what humans do," he said simply. "We're gentle with those who need protection, and we're merciless with those who hurt innocent people." A young Zephyrian child, maybe 8 years old by human standards, approached one of the Marines. The soldier, a tough veteran named Kim Dong-soo, who had fought in 3 different wars, knelt down and offered the child a ration bar from his pack. "Thank you," the child whispered in broken English. Kim Dong-soo's eyes softened. "You're welcome, little one. No one's going to hurt you anymore." Siltith watched this exchange with growing amazement. The same beings who had just destroyed the entire enemy fleet were now sharing their food with frightened children. She had never seen such a combination of devastating military power and compassionate mercy. "Why did you come?" she asked. Changmin, as they prepared to evacuate the prison ship. "Why risk your lives for people you've never met?" Changmin was quiet for a moment, helping an injured Zephyrian onto a stretcher. "Because you asked for help," he said finally. "And because that's what humans do. When someone is in trouble, we help them." "But you don't even know us," Siltith protested. "We're not your people." "You are now," Changmin replied. "The moment you called for help, you became our responsibility. That's how humans see the universe. There are people who need help, and there are people who can provide it. We can provide it." Captain Wu Jin's voice came through the Marines' radio. "Sergeant Major, how are we doing in there?" "All prisoners accounted for, sir," Changmin reported. "We're ready for evacuation. Good work. Bring them home." As the last of the prisoners were helped onto the human transport ships, Siltith looked back at the Vactar prison ship one final time. Just hours ago, she had thought she would die in that dark, terrible place. Now, she was free, rescued by beings from a world so dangerous that most species couldn't even survive there. But she was beginning to understand that. Earth's reputation as a death world wasn't just about its harsh environment. It was about the kind of people that environment created, beings who were gentle enough to comfort frightened children, but fierce enough to face any enemy who threatened the innocent. The news traveled through the galaxy like wildfire. In cantinas and trading posts, on space stations and colony worlds, everyone was talking about the same impossible story. A human fleet of just 12 ships had destroyed the entire Vactar occupation force at Kepler 442. Most people didn't believe it at first. The Vactar Empire had been conquering worlds for centuries. They were the boogeyman that parents used to scare their children. And now, suddenly, they had been defeated by beings from a death world that most species had never even heard of. The Vactar capital world of Krextal, Emperor Vexarin, sat on his throne of black metal and polished bone, listening to the reports with growing rage. The throne room was massive, designed to intimidate visitors with its soaring ceilings and walls covered in the weapons of conquered enemies. But today, the Emperor felt small and vulnerable. "Say that again," he demanded, his voice echoing through the chamber. General Morkith, the highest-ranking military officer in the Empire, knelt before the throne. His armor was scratched and dented from years of warfare, but his hands were shaking as he spoke. "My lord, the fleet at Kepler 442 has been destroyed. Admiral Krekstar is dead. Only a handful of ships escaped."
"Back destroyed by him?"
Vexron's voice was dangerously quiet. "By humans, my lord. 12 ships from a world called Earth. The survivors say they fight like nothing we've ever encountered. They charged directly into our formation, ignoring our firepower as if it were nothing."
Ow.
Emperor Vexron stood up slowly, his massive frame casting a shadow across the throne room. He was nearly 3 meters tall, covered in the scars of 100 battles, and his eyes glowed with the fury of a predator that had just discovered it was no longer at the top of the food chain. 12 ships, he said slowly. 12 ships defeated. 50 of our best warships. Yes, my lord. The survivors say the humans are unlike anything in the galaxy. They seem to have no fear of death, and their ships are built to withstand punishment that would destroy any other vessel. Vexron's roar of fury shook the entire palace. Guards throughout the building stopped what they were doing and listened, in terror as their emperor's rage echoed through the halls. "Mobilize everything," he commanded. "Every ship, every soldier, every weapon in the Empire. I want a fleet so large that it blots out the stars themselves. We'll find this Earth, and we will turn it into a graveyard." "My lord," General Morkith said carefully, "perhaps we should investigate these humans more carefully first. Learn their weaknesses, understand their tactics." "No," Vexron snarled. "We will crush them with overwhelming force. No world can stand against the full might of the Vaktar Empire. Gather 10,000 ships, 20,000, however many it takes. These Deathworlders will learn what happens when they challenge us. Meanwhile, millions of light years away, Admiral Kim Taeho sat in his office aboard Terra Station, reading the intelligence reports that had been flooding in from across the galaxy. The Galactic Council had been very helpful, sharing everything. They knew about Vaktar military capabilities and their recent movements. Sir Colonel Park Hyansu entered the office, carrying a tablet full of data. "The latest reports from our deep space monitoring stations. The Vaktar are mobilizing their entire fleet." Taeho looked up from his reports. "How many ships? Conservative estimate? 10,000, but our analysts think it could be as many as 15,000. They're stripping every system of defenses, calling in every ship in their empire." Taeho said calmly. Park Hyansu looked confused. "Sir, they're bringing everything they have to one place. That makes our job easier." Intelligence Officer Lee Minho knocked on the door and entered. "Admiral, the Galactic Council is sending urgent messages. They're recommending that we evacuate Earth immediately. They think the Vaktar fleet is too large for us to handle."
Oh.
Smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Send a message back to the Council. Thank them for the intelligence, but tell them we won't be evacuating." "Should I tell them about Operation Anvil?" Lee Minho asked. "No. Let them think we're crazy. It's better that way." Park Hyansu leaned forward. "Sir, with respect, maybe. The Council has a point. 10,000 ships is a massive force. Even with our advantages, the odds are overwhelming." Taeho stood up and walked to the window, looking out at Earth spinning slowly below. "Colonel, do you know why we call this planet a death world?" "Because of the harsh environment, sir. The weather, the gravity, the radiation. That's part of it," Taeho agreed. "But the real reason is because of what that environment created. Humans don't just survive in hostile conditions, we thrive in them. We turn disadvantages into advantages. We make the impossible possible." He turned back to his officers. "The Vaktar think they're bringing an overwhelming force to crush us. What they don't understand is that they're bringing everything they have to the one place in the galaxy where we're strongest. They're not invading Earth. They're walking into a trap that we've been preparing for decades." "Send word to all commands," Taeho ordered. Operation Anvil is now active. Send a message to the 7th Fleet. Tell Captain Wujin to come home. It's time to show the galaxy what Earth can really do. The Vactor Armada dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, like a swarm of angry locusts. Over 12,000 ships stretched across space in a formation that had conquered dozens of worlds. Emperor Vexron had sent everything: battleships, carriers, destroyers, and support vessels. It was the largest fleet in Vactar history, and it had come to turn Earth into a smoking ruin. Admiral Vekaran stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the tactical display with satisfaction. The human homeworld was just a small blue dot in the distance, seemingly defenseless. After the humiliation at Kepler 442, the Vactor would finally have their revenge. "Begin the advance," he ordered. "All ships move toward the 3rd planet. We will show these Deathworlders what happens when they challenge the Empire." But as the massive fleet began moving into the system, something impossible started to happen. The sensors began picking up energy signatures everywhere, not just around Earth, but throughout the entire solar system. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, his voice filled with confusion. "I'm reading weapons platforms behind those asteroids, and there are ships hidden in the shadow of that large moon." Vekaran looked at his display more carefully. What he had thought was empty space was actually filled with human defenses. Weapons platforms were tucked behind asteroids, battle stations were hidden in the shadows of moons, and defensive networks were scattered throughout the system like a spider's web. "By the void," he whispered, "there are weapons platforms everywhere." As if responding to his words, the human defenses suddenly came alive. Ships emerged from behind asteroids where they had been hiding for weeks. Battle stations that had looked like space rocks suddenly revealed themselves as massive fortresses. And from the direction of the sun itself, more human vessels appeared, their hulls glowing from the heat of operating so close to the star. Admiral Kim Taho watched the Vactor fleet from his command center aboard Fortress Sol, massive space station that had been built in Earth's orbit over the past 20 years. The station was a marvel of human engineering, part fortress, part shipyard, part symbol of humanity's determination to defend their home. "All stations, this is Admiral Kim," he broadcast to the human fleet. "Today we show the galaxy what happens when you threaten Earth for humanity." The response was immediate. Throughout the solar system, human ships and weapons platforms opened fire. But this wasn't the chaotic battle that most species expected. This was a coordinated defense that had been planned and practiced for decades. Commander Ru Minjin led the outer system defense from his command ship near Jupiter. His job was to break up the Vactor formation before they could reach Earth. "All ships execute Pattern Alpha," he ordered. "Drive them into the asteroid field." The human ships moved with perfect coordination, herding the Vactor fleet like shepherds driving sheep. The aliens found themselves being pushed toward the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, where thousands of rocks the size of mountains waited to crush their ships. "They're trying to force us into the asteroid field," Vekaran realized. "All ships change course, avoid the rocks." But it was too late. The humans had been planning this for years. They knew every asteroid, every gravity well, every hiding place in their own solar system. They used Jupiter's massive gravity to slingshot their ships at incredible speeds, peering behind the Vactar fleet when they least expected it. "Sir, we're taking heavy casualties," the tactical officer reported. "The humans are using the entire system as a weapon. They're driving our ships into asteroid fields using planets as shields, and their coordination is perfect." Vekaran watched in horror as his mighty fleet was being torn apart. The humans didn't fight like any other species he had encountered. They weren't just defending their planet, they were using their entire solar system as a fortress. Near Saturn, Captain Park Ji-won commanded a squadron of human destroyers that had been hiding in the planet's rings. "Target their command ships," she ordered. "Take out their ability to coordinate." The human ships emerged from Saturn's rings like ghosts, their weapons already charged and ready. The Vactor had no idea they were there until the first energy beam started tearing through their hulls. "This is impossible," Vekaran muttered. "How can they be everywhere at once?" What he didn't understand was that humans had been preparing for this moment for 50 years. Every human child learned about the defense of Earth in school. Ship and the human fleet had practiced these maneuvers hundreds of times, and every weapon in the solar system was operated by people who were literally fighting for their homes, their families, and their way of life. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "half our fleet is destroyed or disabled. The humans are everywhere. They're not fighting like any species we've ever encountered." Decaran looked at his tactical display and realized the truth. The humans hadn't just built a few ships to defend their planet. They had turned their entire solar system into a fortress. And now, 12,000 Vactor ships were trapped inside it with nowhere to run. The Battle of Sol lasted 3 days and 3 nights. And when it was over, Vacta Empire was nothing more than scattered debris floating in the cold vacuum of space. The massive fleet that had conquered dozens of worlds was gone, destroyed, by a species that most of the galaxy had never even heard of just months before. Admiral Kim Tae-ho stood on the observation deck of Fortress Sol, looking out at the wreckage of what had once been the most feared military force in the galaxy. Broken ships drifted past his window, their hulls torn open and their lights dark forever. It should have been a moment of triumph, but Tae-ho felt only sadness for the lives that had been lost. "Sir," Colonel Park Hyun-soo approached with a datapad. "The cleanup crews are asking what to do with the Vactor survivors. We have about 3,000 prisoners." "Treat them well," Tae-ho said without hesitation. "Give them medical care, food, and proper quarters. They're not our enemies anymore. They're just people who made bad choices." The colonel looked surprised. "Sir, these are the same beings who enslaved entire worlds. They came here to destroy Earth." "I know," Tae-ho replied. "But that doesn't mean we have to become like them. We're better than that." Within hours of the battle's end, messages began flooding in from across the galaxy. The Galactic Council requested an emergency meeting. Species that had been oppressed by the Vactor for centuries were celebrating in the streets. And somewhere in the depths of space, other empires were quietly reassessing their own expansion plans. The meeting was held on the neutral world of Nexus Prime, a planet that served as the diplomatic center of the galaxy. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall, all wanting to see these mysterious humans who had accomplished the impossible. Admiral Kim Tae-ho entered the hall flanked by Captain Choi Woo-jin and Colonel Park Hyun-soo. They wore simple military uniforms instead of the elaborate robes and armor favored by other species. Too many in the audience. They looked surprisingly ordinary. Just 3 beings from a distant world would somehow change the course of galactic history. Council Chairman Mordick called the assembly to order. "We are here to discuss the aftermath of the Battle of Sol and the unprecedented actions of the human species." He gestured to Admiral Tae-ho. The Vactor Empire controlled over 40 star systems. Their territory includes dozens of worlds with billions of inhabitants. By right of conquest, all of this now belongs to humanity. A murmur ran through the assembly. This was how galactic politics worked. The strong took from the weak, and the victors claimed the spoils of war. But Admiral Tae-ho's response shocked everyone in the room. "We're giving it all back," he said simply. "Every world that the Vactar conquered will be returned to its original inhabitants." "We're not here to build an empire." The hall fell silent. Several representatives looked at each other in confusion, as if they hadn't heard correctly. "You're giving it back?" Mordick asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "That's right." Captain Woo-jin stepped forward. "We didn't fight the Vactar for territory or resources. We fought them because what they were doing was wrong. Innocent people were being hurt, and we had the power to stop it. But the strategic value alone," protested Ambassador Velthor from the Centauri Federation. "Those systems control major trade routes. The mineral wealth is beyond calculation. You don't want it." Colonel Park Hyun-soo said firmly. "What we want is something much more valuable. We want a galaxy where people can live without fear." Admiral Tae-ho activated a holographic display showing the galaxy. "We're establishing the Terran Protection Pact. It's simple. Any species that calls for help will receive it. Any aggressor that threatens innocent people will face the full might of humanity." The implications of this statement rippled through the assembly like a shockwave. For the first time in galactic history, a major military power was offering protection without asking for anything in return. "You're offering to defend species you've never met," asked Representative Clarthon from the Outer Rim Coalition. We're offering to defend anyone who needs it, Tejo replied. That's what humans do. We protect those who can't protect themselves. In the months that followed, the galaxy watched in amazement as humanity kept its word. Human ships began patrolling, the spaceways responding to distress calls and stopping aggressors before they could harm innocent people. Species that had lived in terror for centuries suddenly found themselves safe. The Zephyrian mining colonies were rebuilt with human help. The slave worlds of the former Vactar Empire were liberated and given aid to recover. And throughout the galaxy, a new message began to spread. There were protectors out there, beings who would come when called and ask for nothing in return. Council Chairman Mordic stood in his office one evening, looking out at the stars and thinking about how much had changed. A young diplomat named Silri approached with the daily reports. Sir, the pirate attacks in the Outer Rim have stopped completely, she reported. The raiders are too afraid to operate now that they know humans might respond to distress calls. Mordic nodded. And the territorial disputes? Down by 70%. No one wants to risk being seen as an aggressor when humanity is watching, the old chairman smiled. For the first time in his long life, the galaxy was becoming a place where the strong protected the weak, instead of preying on them. The Deathworlders had received an alien SOS, and they had indeed sent fleet doom, but only to those who deserved it. The age of galactic bullies was over, and a new age of peace had begun.